It was too foggy to make out the writing on the sign, but small towns all have similar names anyway. I felt it was time to stop and rest, and not just because I couldn't see 5 feet even with the fog lights on. I had left the motorway 3 hours ago and had been driving along the country roads ever since. Every now and then, I would pass a settlement, but nothing that appealed to me. This time it was different. I knew I was approaching my unknown destination. It was as if a soft voice had whispered, "Warmer, warmer, warmer," into my ear. The cold, damp air seeped through the cracks of my car. I drove slowly along the deserted streets until a wide exit opened its thighs in the fog. When it was almost too late, I saw a motel sign. Apart from my car, there were only 3 other vehicles on the extensive grounds. I took my heavy suitcase out of the trunk and walked up to the 2-story building, which was lying in the pea soup like a dead whale. The reception door was open, not a soul was present, and there was no answer to the bell on the counter or to my shouting. After waiting 5 minutes and still standing alone in the lobby, I put my suitcase under the counter and decided to find a bar and come back later. I really needed a drink. Luckily, I didn't have to look far, because I could already see a tempting pink glow at the other end of the courtyard. The bright neon sign was visible even through the thick fog. The name Heaven's Night sounded promising. When I crossed the threshold, I was disappointed. There were only 2 other people present, a hunchbacked barman and a wine-bellied stripper who ponderously wrapped herself around her pole like a snail. But I didn't want to go out into the damp cold again, so I sat down at the bar. I ordered a triple whiskey for myself and, in order to break the ice, the same for the barman, but he shook his head dismissively and just put my drink in front of me. Beneath his greasy mop of hair, I could see red spider veins covering his face, not the sign of an anti-alcoholic. I asked the man where all the people were on a Friday night, but he just wiped his hand through the air, which probably meant scattered around. Then he left me to my thoughts which I didn't really want to be alone with. The bar itself was exactly to my taste, dirty, gloomy, and musty. The walls were paneled with wood, the air was thick with cold smoke and sweat. The few windows were greasy and had become opaque with time. I saw my blurred face in the mirror behind the bar. Was I pretty? Was I ugly? I couldn't tell. In fact, I had often thought about cutting a long scar across my cheek just to make my face more recognizable and real. The fact that I had a lot of money thanks to an inheritance didn't help in this matter. My wife, who was younger and prettier than me, had repeatedly assured me that she wasn't interested in my money, but I never believed her. If we had put all our preferences on a scale, it would have simply tipped over in her direction. Only my money and the fact that she'd brought a son into the marriage, an obnoxious little shit called Jim, tipped the scales slightly back in my favor. I removed my wedding ring and looked at the white circle on my finger. In a few days, all evidence of our union would be gone forever. I ordered another whiskey. One night I dreamt I was dragging Jim by the hand through the streets of a town not unlike this one. I don't remember where I took him. The next morning, he looked at me in fear, as if the dream had actually happened. I began to understand that our dreams devour the people around us. It was my wife's own fault that she had left me alone for longer and longer periods to pursue her career. Thanks to my wealth, I didn't have to work and spent a lot of time at home, so she decided that I should look after Jim after the nursery. Her best friend and neighbor, a widow in her 40s, began to court me. I liked it, of course, even though I knew it wasn't real affection, but ordinary envy that drove her. She didn't make me feel like an appendage. I was the younger and prettier one. She'd bring me and Jim dinner, then we'd put the kid in front of the TV and have fun in the bedroom. The little bastard caught us once, but he quickly realized he'd better keep his mouth shut. Since then, I have given him cognac and warm milk to take a nap in front of the TV each day. I started crossing one line after another, going to cheap prostitutes who pursue their trade in caravans, hitting women and swearing at them during sex. The widow was no longer jealous of my wife, but she still kept coming back to let me abuse her. I kept asking myself why I couldn't accept my happiness, but couldn't come to any conclusion, and kept working to destroy everything I had. You can always go further, but you can never go back. The new land you step on becomes your home. To distract myself, I watched the old stripper and wondered who she was dancing for, probably for herself, to distract herself from her thoughts. I approached her and slipped a $5 note into her thong. She didn't look at me, but leaned forward so that I could see her dark, star-shaped anus under the worn-out rubber band. I was overcome with a great desire to knead her sagging breasts. I thought of my wife's lean body, defined by yoga, Pilates, and jogging, but felt no emotion. This here was a woman for someone like me, as shabby and worn out as my soul. Back at my seat, I saw that the barman had fallen asleep on his feet. So, I took the bottle of whiskey from behind the bar and poured myself a drink. Then I took a 24 by 20 photo out of my jacket, which I had quickly pocketed before leaving. It showed my wife and her son on a sunny day in the park, a picture I had taken myself. I tried to remember how I had felt that day, but couldn't find the matching memories. Even though I had lived with them, they had long since faded from my mind. Even the thought of how she would come into the empty house left me cold. First, she will hope that me and Jim were just on an unannounced trip. Then she will be hit by the certainty that something was wrong. If we meet again, I'll tell her about the empty gaze behind the half-closed eyelids, the trickle of vomit down the chubby cheek. I downed half a glass of whiskey and immediately poured another one. My attempt to get the widow past the boy and out of the house quickly had been unsuccessful. She realized something was wrong with Jim and went to look after him. I had no choice but to take off my belt and release her of her miserable existence. When the job was done, I packed her, the boy, and the tarnished tarp into 2 suitcases and left. I threw her in a river on the way, but kept Jim as a traveling companion for my journey. I felt it was time to go. The bartender was snoring and the stripper had stopped dancing and was sitting on a wooden bench, smoking a cigarette and tapping away on a smartphone. I stuck a 20 and the photo under my empty glass and headed for the exit.
Have a good night, mister.
It was the barman who had woken from his slumber. He was staring at me from under his greasy hair.
Yeah, have a good night.
The stripper grinned and showed me her gapped denture. Without answering, I walked briskly out the door. The fog had thickened, and the hotel at the other end of the square was no longer visible. Who knows if it was still there? I started walking, but stopped immediately after noticing something moving in the mist. Several small shadows slowly approached me. Were they the town's residents finally celebrating the end of their workday? But the figures were too small, like children. I went back to the bar, but the door was closed. In the darkness behind the glass, I recognized the bartender and the stripper, both smiling softly. Small hands that didn't feel human grabbed my ankles. My feet were pulled from under me, and I crashed on the damp concrete. The mist entered my head through every orifice and clouded my brain. Then I was pulled behind the curtain. I was home. In my restless dreams, I see this city. I walk its streets with the boy by my hand,